All right, guys, welcome back to Real Estate Today. I am one of your hosts, Mr. Jeff Beggins, along with my brother
Craig Beggins.
and our brother from another mother,
Mike Puma.
So, what we're going to talk about today, we got three topics for you that are super relevant about what's going on in the industry right now. Number one is some shocking things you might not know about real estate agents themselves and how many of them are not productive, and the ones that are productive, what really makes that. So we're going to talk about the true value of an agent and how there's a lot of them that don't bring it, right? Second thing we're going to talk about is it's the inventory shortage slash surplus slash shortage slash pouncing that we're about to see, right? And we're talking about rates and how that all comes down together, what some hedge funds are looking to do, and how that's going to affect you as a buyer and a seller. And then the third one we're going to talk about is leverage, using leverage in real estate, and talking about from an investment aspect. So those are three pretty diverse topics we're going to hit today. So let's dive into the first one, Craig, because you started out with a stat earlier, which I think was pretty interesting and pretty depressing for an industry as a whole. So go ahead, let's talk about that.
Okay, well, don't tell anybody, but I was actually watching an Instagram post because I'm kind of reading, not social media, but I was tagged in it because this is a guy that I follow, and he said that 49% of agents did between 0 and 1 transaction last year.
Yeah.
And then he made a statement that was kind of cool. You know, if you're in a regular work industry, you know, you start out as an apprentice and then you grow into a manager and then you grow into a VP and then you grow into a president, right? If you're good. But when you start out in real estate, you're an agent. And 30 years later, you're still an agent. There's no typical measuring stick to say how good you are, how much experience you have. And so I think that's what we need to talk about. And I'm not putting down new agents getting started because they're doing a great job, especially if supported by a good company like us, because our agents are taught lean on me, lean on us as a company. But a lot of agents in the industry are they're hobbyists. 0 to 1 transaction, that barely covers your board fees, you know, because it costs about $1,300 to get your license and join the board of realtors. So
it's the framework though, right? I mean, essentially, if you look at the framework of becoming an agent, it was set up for them to fail, right? It was set up to be a numbers game.
Right.
If in Florida, every state's slightly different, but 63 hours. 63 hours. And I take a test. I can do the course online. So you don't really even know if I was paying attention. As long as I'm a good studier, I can sit there and take note cards, and then I can take an exam, and I pass that exam. And then they say, congratulations, now you're qualified to go handle the largest financial transaction in most people's lives. Don't screw it up.
Right.
That's it. Then I get to pick a broker, and you have two types of agents. You have agents who truly say, you know what, I know that I'm doing something new. I really want to be successful at this. I'm going to go pick a broker that's going to prepare me for what's to come. And then you have the other side that's like, I'm sure this is pretty easy. I've watched a lot of HGTV. I'm just going to go pick a broker that'll give me the most amount of money from every transaction. And screw training, I'll figure it out as I go.
No, Mike, right? I got to interrupt you on this one for a second.
It's really sad. That's true, though.
It is. But I want to do a contrast for a second. In order to get your license to be a cosmetologist, right, to cut hair, right?
I was going to say the same thing.
1,200 hours. 1,200 hours of what you have to complete in order to be licensed by the cosmetology board. 1,200 hours. And how many hours again in real estate?
63.
63. Right? It's obscene. It's absurd, is what it is. And let's think about this too. A lot of people watch HGTV and think it's simple, right? You get the couple that raises lizards and they buy a $2 million beach house and they look at 3 houses and they pick one and life is easy, right? That's not real estate. That's not real estate. But a lot of people think it's simple. You come in, people just flow through the door. You put them in your fancy Mercedes and you drive them to houses and you make 10 grand, right? And then that's what you do in real estate. That's what HGTV says. it is. But when they get in, it's a dramatically different story, as we all know, right? It's a entrepreneurship business of actually creating your own business and running it and having to have discipline. And we can talk about that. But very, very few, and I'm not trashing the industry at all. I'm thinking there's a lot of people that shouldn't be in the industry, but I think that they work themselves out of the business, right? Because they don't have the staying power. They're not stick. They do a deal or two with their friends, and that's it. But you get professionals that have been in this business like a long time. It becomes a real serious business, and it pays well, but there's a lot of skill, and the hours that get put in until you get to that level are tremendous, right? And so that's what I want to kind of draw a distinction about what goes into being a really great advisor, if you will, right?
Well, let me give you an example. So yesterday after the sales meeting, a girl came up and she's a newer agent. She's probably done 5 or 6 transactions in her first year, which is a lot for a new agent to get started. And she's got a listing in a town called Sun City Center. And it's been on the market now for 30 days. And she's kind of freaking out. What should I do? And she was asking the manager, I was listening to this conversation, what should I do? And the answer was, it depends. What's the motivation of the seller? Are they living in the house? Are they not living in the house? Are they making mortgage payments? Or are they not making mortgage payments? Right? It's priced right in the agent's mind, but have we updated the market analysis? Because the market changes all the time, right? So just the collaboration and hearing the conversation go on between the agent and the manager trying to tell the agent, look, it depends, right? I can't tell you. 30 days is not a long time to be on the market. If nothing is selling in town, then it's not the house, it's the market. If everything else around you is selling, then it's the house, not the market. So which one is it? And that's not an easy, there's no push a button and get an answer. You don't just go to MLS and say, give me a price, right? It's a negotiation, it's a strategy. It depends on so many different factors that takes experience to understand. And that's what happens.
And there's two industries, and I think there's two completely different industries lumped inside this industry. You have the seller industry, which is completely different than the buyer industry. And a lot of people play in both. But if you really think about it, the buyer agent industry is simple, right? You just have to find people that have life happening to them and that they desire a new place to live, right? And it sounds simple, but you have to earn trust to be the person to guide them and hold them hand.
I think it's even more nuanced than that, though, Jeff. I think that's like saying e-commerce is different than retail. Well, sure, there are differences, but there's even differences within e-commerce, right? What am I selling? Am I selling a product? Am I selling a service? If I'm representing an investor, right, that's very different than if I'm helping John and Susie buy their first property. And that's the thing. There's this industry is so we treat it like this. It's this massive industry. At the end of the day, we're starting a business. That's all you're doing. You are starting a business. And if we look at any entrepreneur across every industry, most of them fail. Right? Most of them suck. Most of them don't do well across any industry, any business. Right? In total. So it shouldn't be a shocker that most real estate business startups, which is what they are, fail because most of them don't put in the time, effort, and energy and are not focused enough to get really good. And if you look at the biggest companies in the world, they all started with a clear mission. The ones that succeeded. Amazon did not start out with what they are today. What did they start out doing? Selling books. And not selling books in bookstores and online and here. No, they sold books online. That's all they did. Then they said, wait a minute, we could probably add some audiobooks. That'd be interesting. And so they start that. Wait a minute, if we could sell those, could we sell DVDs? Could we sell movies? Yeah, we probably could do that. Well, if we could sell that, then they started expanding as it made sense to expand. And even with them, what's happened over the years? There's some stuff they've tried that's worked out really well, and they've scaled that. They have other stuff that they've tried, didn't work out, and they cut it. Right? But they did not start out trying to be everything to everyone. And unfortunately, agents get in this business and they're not really taught that. They're not taught, hey, let's pick a niche, let's pick a lane, let's become an expert, let's build a business around this. And it's not a real estate business. It is a first-time homebuyer representation business. It is I'm going to go represent an investor business. I'm going to go sell in this zip code, this type of property. If they do that, they're going to be successful. If they don't do that, good luck.
They've got no shot. That's right. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I cringe when a Tampa agent says, "Hey, I got a buyer who's looking in Northport. Can I go? Do you have any advice for me?" I say, "Yeah, refer them to an agent in Northport." So it's always my answer. I hate that answer, but you can't fairly represent a client in Northport, which is 2 hours south of us, because you don't know what goes on in the market.
Unless you take the time to go educate yourself on that marketplace.
Correct.
So,
But then you got to go spend a week or two snooping around the neighborhoods, learning all the stuff.
That's right.
And then the buyer doesn't buy.
Correct. Because they don't run their business like a business, right? So the simplicity of this one is finding people, right? I don't care if you're selling hot dogs or shirts or houses or you're listing representation services, your buyer representation services. You have to have people to talk with. That's it. So most people fail. I think we'll all agree with this one by not talking with enough people. Most I don't care what industry you're in. If you've got a phenomenal hot dog, right, and you're not telling people about your hot dog, you're out of business. You're not selling crap for hot dogs, right? So that's just the simplicity business 101. Now, the people that do well in every industry are those that you got to have a good product, or you have to have a good delivery at the end of the day. Right, at the end of the day. But number two, you have to relate to deal with people, right? And that's really what it is, because this business is unique because we're in the people and communications business. We teach our salespeople all the time. We're not really in the real estate business. That's the world that we trade in. But really, it's about Bob and Mary are having a kid and they need a bigger home. I'm selling the trust relationship with Bob and Mary to fully understand their life, what they need, which areas are good, bad, and indifferent, which loan programs are good for them, which homes make sense, older homes, newer homes, roof, insurance, all these different flood components that go into the mix, and just put that all together to educate them about what they should be doing, what's in the best interest for their family, right? So that's one thing, right? But there's a lot of skill. That one little blurb I just said, that's years of experience that goes into doing what I just said well. Right? Because you can't understand, to Craig's point, you can't understand Northport and Tampa or Atlanta and Peachtree, right? You can't get the differences and nuances in that area. You can't just look at Zillow and think you understand real estate, because there's so many differences with elevations and streets and locations and exposures and speed zones and school limits and school districts and zoning requirements in different cities and rental restrictions and ADUs. There's so many things. And you can really screw up, right? If you try to pretend to be an ankle expert when you're actually trained in being a shoulder specialist. And that's kind of the analogy we like to use all the time, is you got to get into what you're doing and just know your trade. And then once you know your trade, then you figure out your people. Then once you find your people, you have to have the people skills and communication skills to actually connect with them and build that trust and understand where they come from. What is their personality style? What is their physical representational system? Are they visual, auditory, kinesthetic? What's their buying strategy sequence? What's their attraction strategy sequence? How do you make them feel comfortable? How do you speak in their language? How do you sell and explain that home to them in a language that appeals to their attraction strategies and buying strategies and personality profiles and everything in the middle there? So, I mean, there's a lot to it. And how many people do you think actually take the time to learn the skill sets that we're actually talking about right now?
Almost none. But I'm going to give us a shameless plug here, because I think our agents are at an advantage because.
Oh, fuck. I gotta step up for a second.
Mike and I said, I think we're at an advantage because our agents, we train every day.
Yep.
Right. So our agents are getting a master's level education a lot faster than an agent who does not work for us.
Yep.
Because we're sharing, we're exposing, we're learning, we're just talking about things. I mean, it's hard to come up with a topic for every day.
Hey, I gotta run. You guys gotta carry the rest of this one. I had emergency. You gotta go.
Okay, we'll call you a bit.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think one of the biggest challenges our agents face is the fact that a lot of times the agent on the other side of the transaction is uneducated, right? And our agents spend a lot of time educating them on the transaction. So that's a big challenge, and it's an unfortunate side of the industry. The reality is, a lot of brokers are hands off. A lot of brokers. I mean, and let's be real. We don't have to train every day. You and Jeff especially don't have to be the ones that are offering the training and involved. You could be very hands off. We've got hundreds and hundreds of agents across the state of Florida. We've got a full management team. You could hand things off and say, oh, you guys do it. Call me if there's a legal problem. You could, right? And a lot of brokers do. And that results in their agents just being another member of their brokerage instead of actually learning and building a business and growing and being educated. And so that's the biggest difference. The problem that consumers have is they don't know that, right? So on the consumer side, it gets tricky because a lot of times I think the decision is being made by, oh, well, I've known Susie for 20 years. Okay, and I get that. And friendships and relationships matter. But this is business, and when it comes to real estate, you're dealing with again, for most of you, the largest, if not one of the largest financial transactions that you will ever do. And as much as I value my friendships and my relationships, if I don't feel like the person that I'm about to assign that responsibility to can actually handle it, I'm going to not give it to that person, right? Just because I've known them for a long time. Because maybe up until 6 months ago, Susie was cutting hair or Susie was home with the kids. And those are great things. They're just not relevant to me wanting to now sell my largest financial asset, right? So, and in this case, I'm using Susie, some random name, but if Susie's qualified, awesome. If she's got a great support team behind her and you feel comfortable with that, awesome. My point is, whether it's your best friend of 20 years or somebody you don't know, you need to do your due diligence if you're on the consumer side. Find out who's representing them, because at the end of the day, what most people don't realize, they're actually not doing business with Susie directly. They're actually doing business with a broker. So who is that broker? How long have they been around? How much support do they have? Do they have a team behind them? Have they ever been sued? These are things that I would want to know, right? So I'm going to peek around Susie and say, hey, who's behind you? Who do you have? What if there's a problem? Because the challenge isn't if there's a problem, it's when there's a problem. And how is that problem going to be resolved? And do the people behind you helping you resolve that, do they have experience resolving those issues? Because the reality is you've been a broker of over 60,000 transactions. There's not much you haven't seen or had to overcome. But there's still new stuff that comes across your desk. You're like, shit, I've never seen that before. That's never happened, right? Out of 60,000 transactions. So when you look at that, then it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong. So if something were to go wrong, who's helping you? And this is something I would legitimately ask any agent I'm interviewing. If something were to go wrong, what team do you have behind you that can help solve that problem? And if it's one of our agents, they're going to turn around and say, listen, we have 33 years of experience. My broker's done over 60,000 transactions. We have an army of over 650 agents. We're doing, thousands of deals a year. There's not much we're not going to be able to help you through. That's comfort. But if you look behind them and they're like, well, I talked to my broker 2 years ago and they're pretty good. Run. And I don't care if that person, that agent has been your friend for 30, run. Hire somebody else to handle the transaction. And I don't know how else to put it. It's just super important.
Well, I'm a premier agent, a broker with Zillow, right? We're in the Zillow team. Zillow, we have 3 things we have to do. ALM. We have to ask for an appointment. We have to identify the location they're considering, and we have to test for the motivation. Those are the 3 things. That has to happen in the first 30 seconds of a phone call. And it's recorded, and there's AI watching it. And when those 3 things happen, they say 78% of all consumers will work with the very first agent they talk to if we set an appointment and do that.
Yep.
Right? And that's an agent who's literally paying for leads. You don't know if they're any good or what they do or not.
Nope.
So one of my missions this year, and because we've talked about it, is I want a buyer presentation made. We've got the new program called Moxie. We've done over 10,000 presentations since it came out, which is a lot.
Yep.
But 75% of those are seller presentations. So we got to level that playing field out now and sit with the buyer and make a presentation and explain our value and net worth to the consumer, because they don't know it, right? And I think the better we get at making a buyer presentation before we start showing houses, because showing houses is easy, right? My least favorite thing is, and this is the kitchen. Yep. Oh, really? The place with the stove and the refrigerator?
I'm pretty sure they can figure that out.
Yeah. So that's not it. It's not opening lockboxes, it's not opening the door. It's qualifying, motivating, having the loan officer teed up to make the best deal. I was telling you today about a customer just got a 5.3% interest rate.
Yeah.
How the hell did they get a 5.3% fixed interest rate? Right? Their agent teamed up with their loan officer, who had the customer had a really high credit score and had cash, so they were able to buy the rate down. But those deals are out there for you. And if your agent's not experienced and know about that, they're gone.
Well, and that, to me, that's the parameters you need to be evaluating the person you're hiring, right, to transact with. Because if you are sitting there saying, and this is a real thing you need to do, what value has the agent brought? If they stick you in a car and you have not spoken to a lender or not pre-approved, fire that agent. If they have sat you in a car before you guys have discussed and truly identified and actually broken down areas that you're interested in, the reasons of why you're interested in those areas, if you have not established a timeline of when you need to be, you don't know where you want to be there, and that agent has put you in a car and drove you around, you need to fire that agent. These are just basic things that agent should be doing prior to even showing you a house. Because the last thing I would want to do is get Craig all excited about a $600,000 house, only to find out that he's pre-approved for $475,000 and that's maxed out and he's not going to be able to afford it. Now all he's got is that house for $600,000 in his head, and everything else is going to suck. And I've just let him down, and I failed as an agent. And we see this a lot, right? This is, and I get it, because there's a lot of agents like, oh my God, Craig wants to buy a house. Awesome. This could be good for me. I'm going to put him in a car. We're going to show him around. He's going to pick one, and then we're going to go from, no, that's that. And quite honestly, I outsource most of my showing, right? I'm not against driving around with you, but that's not why you're hiring me. Right? I'm going to prepare you. I'm going to get you ready. I'm going to use my lender network to make sure that you're getting the best deal possible. I'm going to help you narrow down the area. I'm going to help you get the showing set up. And if I can't be there to show you where the kitchen is, I think you'll be okay. Right? I can outsource that for $25 via an app called Showami, have somebody else unlock the door for you, let you tour it, because it's a personal thing anyways, and then give me feedback. And then the second you say, yep, that's the one, now I'm going hardcore as your single agent who's representing you and has your best interest at heart. Now I'm going to go negotiate. Now I'm going to go pull every string I can to get you the absolute greatest deal on that property I can. And that's where my value is. The problem is most agents don't pitch it that way. Most agents, because most agents don't even know where their value is, right? They don't know any better. They just like, oh yeah, I show people. No, you don't. That is not your value. And if you presented that as your value, I am concerned, because you are in big trouble as this market continues to shift.
Well, back to my opening statement, 49% of agents did between 0 and 1 transactions last year. They just don't have the experience. What you just spit out was super articulate, right? And very, very true. And if you can't define that as an agent, you need to go back to school and learn what your value is, because it's not driving people around.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool. All right, let's move on to the next topic, which was, Zillow sent me market stats, and I love market stats, you know me. And the average, and once again, there's no such thing as an average real estate market, right? Because there's micro markets all over the place. But the overall average price of a home with a 20% down payment is a $1,780 a month payment. Right?
Yep.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Guess what the average rental is right now?
Oh, it's got to be in the twos, mid
It's
twos.
$2,700 a month. So almost $1,000 a month more to rent a home, an average home, than it is to own an average home with a 20% down payment. Now, granted, most people don't have a 20% down payment, but you can also buy a house with 15%, 10%, 5%, 3.5%, 0%. We've got 0% down payment loans. So depending on who you are, and when I interview you as the buyer, this is part of the questions I got to kind of ask. How much money do you have to put down? But it doesn't matter. So we're not judging you. We're just trying to help you assess the loan programs, right?
Yep.
So, and then the other thing, our salesman yesterday, the loan officer we had on board, their company has a down payment assistance program where they will give you cash down to close.
Yep.
And if the rates drop, they'll refinance you for free. Like, wow, what a value that is. I mean, that's bringing value to a consumer that if you weren't in that meeting, you missed that message. And it's, you got to show up and learn.
Yep.
But back to my topic. So and this is where you and I were talking earlier. So $2,700 average rental, $1,700 average mortgage payment. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a lot of equity.
It is. And we were talking about, my IRA account has literally done this all year.
Yeah.
It's not any higher than it was at the beginning of the year. My investment property has gone like this, straight up.
Yep.
But what are the other advantages of that? How much money did I put down on my investment property?
Well,
let's just say 20.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And we put out a post today for our agents that did a basic comparison of saying, all right, I have $50,000 that I'm looking to invest, right? $50,000 at a 20% down payment means that if I'm buying real estate with that 50 grand, that I could buy a $250,000 asset, right? So for $50,000 cash, I can control a $250,000 asset. Now, comparably, if I were to buy stock at $50,000, I'm getting $50,000 of stock, right? Now, assuming they both appreciate at a 5% rate a year, I've now gained about $12,500 in equity on that $250,000 property versus gaining $2,500 on that $50,000 I put in stock, right? And so the cash on cash returns about 25% for real estate because I put in 50 and got 12.5 back versus, about 5% of stock. And a couple of financial advisors chimed in and were like, well, this isn't fair because you're not accounting for the mortgage payment and this and that. And I said, okay, sure, right? We could argue that until I'm blue in the face. Yes, you have a mortgage payment, you have costs, right? Now, if I'm buying this as my personal property, though, as I'm making those payments, guess what also is happening? My balance is going down. My equity is going up. So now I'm gaining even more in equity, right? Because I owe less and my house is worth more. So that's not really a good, strong argument if you're a financial advisor trying to go against real estate.
Right? That doesn't even include the tax deductions.
Yeah, and that's not counting the tax deductions and the incentives I have to being a homeowner. And if it's a rental property, you just said, my average mortgage on a $250,000 house, 20% down, I'm going to have about a $1,700 a month payment. Well, on average, I can rent that house for $2,700. So now I have $1,000 a month in cash flow. Sure, property management. Okay, that's 10%. So I got $100 a month in property management. Plus, I'm going to have some maintenance. That usually most people budget about 5%. So I got another $50. So I've got $150. Okay, I'm still cash flowing $850 a month on top of everything else.
That's a nice carpet.
The reality is, it's a strong investment. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be diversified. You should. If you've got investments, I think stocks are great. I think real estate is top notch. I would just argue that if I only have $50,000 or $20,000 or whatever to invest, real estate is going to give you a lot more leverage because at the end of the day, if you said, hey, Mike, you can control a $250,000 asset or you can control a $50,000 asset. I'm taking the $250,000 asset all day, every day. So that's more the point. And we had some some people a little upset with us today about that post, but I'm sorry. If you're a financial advisor and you're that against real estate, I don't want to talk to you anyways.
Right. So one of the things we're talking about this year is 2024 is the year of fives. So we're going to see 5% interest rates probably.
Yep.
We're also going to see a 5% appreciation rate, which is a shocking number because when 2023 was coming to an end, they were talking about 2024 being really shitty.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they're talking about over 5 million home sales. That's a 5%. It rates in the 5% and 5% appreciation.
Yep.
So to your point, your $250,000 house goes up $12,500.
Yep.
But that's $12,500 on the $50,000 you invested.
Yeah.
Which is, whatever that is. It's 25%.
Yeah, it's a 25% cash on cash return.
So,
and if you go to most people and say, hey, I'll give you 25% cash on cash return, they're going to take that deal. There's not a lot of places you can go to do that.
Nope, not at all. So that's the financial leverage piece, right? Using your cash to buy a bigger asset that appreciates more than something else. So if your agent's not talking to you about financial leverage and you don't know about it, you're missing out again. So once again, this is part of the agenting process. That we're not just showing houses. There's a strategy to put you in the right place at the right time with the right income and all those.
Well, and I think it's an important conversation to have because the reality is there's a large majority, and that majority continues to grow, of folks in this country that have an amazing interest rate, right? If you bought when it was 2.5%, 3.5%, 4.5%, it's very unlikely that we see those. If we ever see them again, it's very unlikely that we ever see rates like that again. And if we do, it probably means there was another global pandemic, something disastrous happened, which is not what any of us want. So the reality is you have an extremely good rate. And most of you probably are thinking, oh, I'm never going to sell this house. I know I am, right? Right now, if you ever told me I'd sell this house, I'd tell you you're crazy because I have a great interest rate. This is something that will, even as a rental, would heavily cash flow. And it's an asset that eventually I could leave to my kids. So I don't ever plan to sell this house, right? But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't then be looking at what options do I have to leverage that, because it goes beyond just having a good interest rate. The interest rate's great, but what am I doing with that advantage, right? I'm in an advantageous position because I own an asset at a much lower cost than most other people, right? No discount to the people who literally just closed last week on the house directly across from me. But they have a very similar floor plan, and they paid $700, and I didn't, right? So I have an advantage, but that advantage means nothing if I don't actually leverage it. So how do I leverage it? Well, I talk to an agent. I talk to my financial advisor. I talk to a lender, right? I get their professional opinions and say, hey, here's my situation. This is what I owe. This is my interest rate. Here's my credit score. Here's my income. What can I do to grow this, right? Because I have a huge amount of equity sitting in a property. And if I do nothing with it, cool. Maybe you're status quo and you're going to use that equity to pass along to your kids one day and let that. Awesome. That's a strategy. But another strategy might be, hey, how can I repeat this, right? This has done really well for me. It's built wealth while I've slept. I didn't have to do anything for it, right? I made one good decision 7 years ago, bought the house when I did, and that's resulted in me building personal wealth off of. How do I do more of that, right? That's what all of you should be asking yourself. So if you're in a spot where you're like, nah, I'm never selling this house, great. I don't want you to sell the house. What I do want you to do is talk to me about what options you have. How can we build that again? How can we leverage that into another rental property that cash flows, and then leverage that one, and then leverage that one, if you want to, right? But again, it'd be a bad business decision to not at least know your options, even if you don't do it, right? I still want to know what my options are. Doesn't mean I'm going to say yes to everything, but it does mean, hey, because what happens if tomorrow life changes? Right? Tomorrow, someone could be in an accident, and next thing I know, crap, I gotta go to Virginia where my parents are. What are my options with my house? Now I'm scrambling. But if I'm staying educated because I have a great agent who's constantly educating me on where I stand, what my value is, what my equity is, I'm already going to have an idea of what options I have if something were to change tomorrow, even if I don't want to do something necessarily today. So my advice to everyone watching is, if you are in a piece of real estate that you own currently, if you don't know what that real estate's worth, if you don't know how much equity you have, if you're not constantly keeping up to date with that, what's going on around you, and it's not your job to, that's why you have an agent, you need somebody who's advising you on those things so you can make educated decisions.
Well, let me just get a little more pointed with what you're talking about, because a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, is a super easy thing to do. A local bank will give you one. I mean, you have to qualify for the extra income, but it's basically like a credit card.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a credit card that you use that is a mortgage against your house, so you get to write that off too.
Yep.
So that's how I've been able to leverage the equity in my home to buy other homes. And then I do that.
Yep.
Right? So that's what you're talking about. So you go to your local bank and ask them about a home equity line of credit, and they will tell you, they'll give you usually not more than $250,000.
Yeah.
And you have to show that you have the income capacity to pay that back, or they'll give you less. But to have that little cushion, even if you don't use it, you don't pay anything for it.
Correct.
But it's available for you. Right? Now, don't do what we did in 2005 and go buy jet skis and boats and stupid things like that. That was called over leveraging, and that was a bad idea. But when you're sitting now in a real estate market, we're gonna move into our third step right now, which is the interview I had yesterday with an agent who is in touch with a hedge fund from Arizona, and they're coming to Florida, and they want to buy 1,000 homes. So let's talk about that. Why would a hedge fund, whose job is to take other people's money and invest it, why are they choosing to invest, number one, in Florida, and they want to be in the Tampa Bay area, but 1,000 homes? We already have a housing shortage in Florida. Yep. There is not much for sale, right?
Nope.
So 1,000. Why would a hedge fund do that?
Well, they like making money, and they have access to way more data than most of us will ever have access to. They have analysts and algorithms that are way smarter than I will ever be. So I don't pretend to be. What I do like to do, though, is monitor what those folks are doing, right?
Yep.
And are you going to go out and personally buy 1,000 homes? No. Your version of that might be buying 1 home, 2 homes, 3 homes, 5 homes, 100 homes. Your version of that's going to be different. Right?
You might invest in a hedge fund that's going to go do this for you.
Yeah. Or you might say, hey, let me go do that, or let me go try this, or let me go invest with this REIT over here that's going to go. But the point of it is, they can invest that money in a lot of different places. They can invest that money in a lot of different things. Yet their risk factor, too, is saying, hey, our best use of this money to grow it for the investors so that they give us more money to continue to grow it, right, is to go invest in Florida. It's to go invest in real estate in Florida. And it's to go do it right now. And if that's not saying, hey, wake up, right? And what's going to happen, and this is what drives me crazy, is when they start doing it, the number one post from agents and other people that will pop up in my feed are people complaining that hedge funds are buying up all the homes and this is why there's no inventory. Are you serious? Really?
You're beating out all my finance buyers.
But why are you not doing it? We've been screaming from the rooftops that you should be looking to invest right now. You are going to sit on your hands. They are not. The biggest difference between you and them is that they're going to take action, right? The second biggest difference is they already are qualified and ready to go. Are you? They know how much money they have in the bank. They know how many homes they can go buy. They know the numbers that are going to work. Do you? Have you spoken to a lender, right? This is the difference. If you want to buy and leverage yourself, then you've got to have those conversations today. And if you don't, and you sit on your hands, and then you want to complain about it 6 months from now because they're buying property, I have no empathy for you, because you have the opportunity. You could go take action today, and you either are or you're not. And if you don't, I don't want to hear you complaining about it, because they didn't stop you, right? And if anything, they shine the light saying, hey, Florida's a great place to go buy real estate.
Yeah. And we're not telling you to take action. We're telling you to get educated.
Yeah.
Right. That's the most important thing. Because once you get educated, this sounds kind of funny, but once you get educated and you realize how much equity you have, you kind of feel like you have to spend it. It's like, oh God, I got all this cash. I should do something with it.
It's almost
And
irresponsible not to.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not a good time to do it.
Right.
But you should at least be aware, right? Yeah. Awareness gives you flexibility. Flexibility gives you options, and options give you power. So let's just all become aware of what's going on in the real estate market. And part of that is aligning yourself with a real estate agent, a good real estate agent who can help you with these kind of conversations. Correct. Or call us, right?
Yeah. We're happy to help if we can. But yeah, and you're right. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes your mortgage guy is going to come back and say, I wouldn't do it right now, right? Maybe there's been layoffs at big companies. Maybe your company is a little unstable. If you're unsure of your work situation, maybe now is not the time. If you have a life event happening, maybe now is not the time, right? But again, you should still know. You should still know where you stand. You should still know your situation. I had this conversation with a good friend of mine the other day. I said, listen, you probably know how much money is in your bank account. You probably know how much money is in your 401k. You probably know those things, and you stay relatively up to date with them, especially your bank account. But your largest bank account, your largest asset, are you staying up to date with that? And if not, why? Right? That'd be crazy, because the reality is, in Florida, you're talking about a 5 to 10% change in value every single year. That means it's changing on a monthly basis. So why would you not be paying attention to that?
Yep.
So
that's it. So let's just close with this. Awareness gives you flexibility. Flexibility gives you options, and options give you power. So become aware of your financial situation with your housing situation. And if you're renting, start investing in conversations with your agent and a loan officer team, so we can show you the options and what it could be to your long-term financial well-being when you actually own a home versus renting it. Because that stat threw me for a loss yesterday. $2,700 is the average rent. They just built a rent-to-own community right down the street from me. And $2,700 a month for a townhouse.
And I get it, because a lot of those people are going to watch this and say, well, yeah, but I couldn't afford the 15, 20% down. My argument is, do you know that you need 20% down? Like, have you actually spoken to a lender who told you that you need 20% down?
We have lenders that will give you down payment assistance money with no reimbursement.
Exactly. So my point is, now, maybe given your financial situation, you spoke to the lender and he's like, nah, you're going to need this, right? Maybe your credit's not where it needs to be. Maybe your debt to income isn't where it needs to be. But that's my point. Do you know where it needs to be? Because you can't fix something that you're blind to. So find out, where does it need to be? Because if I am serious, if I'm somebody who's renting, who's like, listen, I want to own a home, I physically can't right now, given my current financial situation. Cool. Then I need to understand where my future financial situation needs to be so that I can. And if I'm committed to that process, then it's all right. This is where I am. This is where I need to be. How do I get here, right? What's my plan? How do I cut some of my expenses so that I can save a little bit more? How do I earn more, right? Is there a way for me to earn more? Whether that's another job, whether that's making an advancement in my career. Is there somewhere that I can increase my income? Right? Because you don't just have to lower debt. You could also increase income, right? So how do I do that? What programs are there? Are there grant programs out there? What are my options? I want to know all of those so I can put myself in a framework to be able to accomplish what I'm saying I want to accomplish, which is homeownership. And it's possible. It might take you 3 months. It might take you 6 months. It might take you a year. but it's going to take you way longer if I don't know what I'm actually working towards. So if you have not had that discussion with a lender and you need a lender, reach out. We have tons of contacts who offer a variety of programs. We're not just going to give you one and say, hey, call him because that's all. No, we use a variety because there's a bunch of different variables and situations. So reach out to us if you need help. We're happy to refer you, even if it's in another state. We can refer you to national lenders that we work with as well and get a clear picture so you can actually get to where you want to be.
I think that's a wrap.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like this content, you want to see more of it, like it, subscribe, follow it, turn the bell on so you get notified every time we release a new version or a new video or a new podcast. And leave us a comment. You want to see something, see us hit a topic, talk about something, comment below. We love the interaction, and good, bad, and ugly. And we appreciate you guys watching.
Yep. Awareness gives you flexibility. Flexibility gives you options, and options give you power. Let's become aware of where we are today.